Viewers, welcome to a special edition of the Hard Facts from Tianjin, China. Viewers, who would have thought a few days back that Tianjin could be a watershed moment in geopolitical history? If the leaders on your screens, and you can see the three principal architects of the future of the East coming together in a manner unprecedented, the optics are very promising, and they always say that while interests are not permanent, opportunities are. And if these three leaders who have displayed unprecedented bonhomie, who have decided to move ahead on the road to cooperation and build trust amongst themselves, can realize the full potential of their own vision and words, then viewers, we could be witnessing the emergence of what many people would say is a trifecta for the 21st century. And I use that word with some deliberation because remember, viewers, we've seen false starts in the past. These countries have sworn that they will cooperate with each other in a spirit that will help give voice to the global South. But they have flattered to deceive. Here they have an opportunity, as I said, to seize the moment, and that moment has been provided by that man, viewers, to the right of your screens, Donald Trump in Washington. His tariff tyranny has meant that these three countries, who are the worst sufferers, have decided for the moment to bury the hatchet, to come together and work to build an alternative framework to realize the aspirations of the global South. Can they do it? Can they actually arrive and realign the high table of global diplomacy? Time will tell. But the promise, as you can see, viewers, is there. We saw Prime Minister Modi walking into the Great Hall, which is right behind me, to inaugurate and be part of that plenary session. And the first person he encountered was President Putin. Was this a coincidence? We will never know. But they embraced, they hugged, they walked arm in arm, and they walked straight up to President Xi, who took a step in their direction. Viewers, what has followed, of course, you have witnessed all through the day today. An unusual coming together in an extremely informal setting. And very importantly, all three leaders made it a point to tweet these visuals from their personal handles, almost sending a message to the entire globe that they are ready to seize the opportunity that has been provided by the hard-nosed diplomacy of Donald Trump. Trump, therefore, viewers, remains the elephant in the room, the catalyst for what could be a transformation. I don't want to get ahead of myself or of the events, viewers, because optics, as I've told you, sometimes don't tell the entire story. Actions are a better judge. But optics do define a moment, and that moment is upon us. The right choices will dictate whether this moment turns into a truly remarkable turning point. These three individuals, viewers, have met over the last 3 days in a bilateral setting and a multilateral setting. The SCO itself was not seen as an organization that was viable given the competing interests that all its member states represent, and of course, their varied political stories and backgrounds. They all subscribe to different values also. That is a different task. But within this formulation, the RIC countries, Russia, India, China, can in fact make a difference. Have we come now to that moment? We're going to ask some of our guests to dissect it. But I want to first begin with David Sofer, who is somebody who is aligned with the Trump view of the world. David Sofer, far from Donald Trump dictating the terms of the conversation, far from dictating the manner in which these three leaders are going to prosecute, in fact, their own foreign policy and assert their own agency on the global scale, these three leaders have thumbed their noses at Donald Trump. Donald Trump realizes that America's influence now doesn't perhaps extend beyond the Atlantic, or even if it does, only to Western Europe. That's where the boundary, ideological boundary, ends. And David Sofer, this shows that America's power has weakened under Donald Trump. Would you agree?
Thanks for having me on, and greetings from Washington, D.C. I definitely would say that this is a show of alignment and shift of trade. Now, with this new found, what we really have here is an exploratory meeting to say that these countries do not need America as much. Now, this is so far out, this would take a very long time to actually come into fruition. These countries use a lot of tariffs. These countries also have a very different way of government and leadership, from, just all out communism to Russia. And then you have India as well, which is the largest democracy in the world. So, I think it's very early days. It's definitely a show of
David Sofer, I'm not really talking about whether this coming together is viable fundamentally. We'll get to that in a short while. What I'm asking you really is to comment on Trump's own limited ability to maneuver the conversation in this part of the world. What these three countries have shown is that they are willing to assert themselves geopolitically and pursue their own interests, which is quite clear, isn't it? I mean, there's no point in being denial about that.
Sure. Well, all these countries are already pursuing their own interests. And, if they want to partner and go against Quads and all of these other programs that have already been in place and, not deal with reciprocal tariffs and that, we'll have to see how that plays out. So that's where we are with it.
Okay, let me open this up. Let me quickly go across to Sushant Sareen. Sushant Sareen, look, I'm not talking about the viability of this coming together outreach that we've seen at the sidelines of the SCO or under the rubric of the SCO. We're just talking about three countries deciding that their strategic interests should not be dictated by a Western consensus. Of course, they have ties to the West. Of course, some of them have deep connections with the United States, but they've all turned around and said to the United States, this is where you get off. This is where we will exercise our strategic autonomy, not in deference to you, but in deference to our interests. Now, whether those interests align or not, we can discuss later, but at least on the face of it, what we're seeing is a pushback.
Pushback, but I think you're also seeing a point of inflection. All these countries are coming together in a manner of speaking. I think we still have a long road to travel on making this somewhat more formal and taking it to a position where we can say, okay, fine, if the West doesn't want to do business with us, just too bad. We can manage within ourselves. For that, the Chinese, for example, being the largest economy, will have to step up to the plate. Are they going to be ready to do that? So there are a lot of issues on that count. But why I say this is a point of inflection is that I think all the countries have been pushed into a corner where they see a convergence of interests. Now, are these interests going to last for any length of time? And do they see that these interests need to be firmed up so that they can enter into a long-term kind of a relationship, or are these transient kind of maneuvers which are taking place? And I think that is where a lot of questions will be asked, purely from an Indian point of view. There has been a kind of rebalancing towards China, no doubt about it, and that is partly because the Americans have pushed us in a certain direction. But if tomorrow the Americans, instead of doubling down on their bullying of India, decide to back down, how does that change the strategic scenario for us? Do we then go back to the Chinese and say, okay, fine, now our interests don't converge anymore, and we are going back, we are tilting back towards the Americans? I don't think that's on the table as far as India is concerned, right? So there will be a delicate kind of a balancing act we'll have to do there. The same question can be put to China. If the Americans tomorrow were to turn around to China and say, okay, let's carve up the world between you and us, right? How do the Chinese play that out? Do they say, no, we don't trust you, we are not going to, we don't believe in this G2 nonsense, and whatever interests we see converge with other countries of the global south, India, Russia, many of the others, we will double down on that particular aspect of the relationship rather than kowtow to you? We don't know how the Chinese are going to play that. We don't know how the Russians are going to play that. If tomorrow there is some kind of a love fest between them and the United States, and Europe simply lumps it because the Americans have asked them to do it, and the Russians say, okay, fine, thank you, India, you were nice to us by buying oil at one particular point of time, but we right now have bigger fish to fry. So we'll have to wait and see how this cookie finally crumbles. But like I said, at this point in time, I think all countries see their interests converge. The principal contradiction is not their rivalry with each other. The principal contradiction, as you very correctly said, is that the United States, which was the paramount power in the world, has decided to burn the house down, which it itself created post-Second World War. That entire global trading arrangement, the entire global security arrangement, political arrangement, Donald Trump and his company are trying to burn it down to the ground. They don't know what to replace it with. And which is why we see that as the principal contradiction which we have to handle. And that gives us an opportunity to try and...
So let me ask you on that point. So Shansari, do you believe that Trump harbors delusions of grandeur which have clearly not realized themselves on the ground? If he was such an effective force that everyone would sort of fall in line at his first diktat, then that clearly has not happened. Would you agree at least with that?
Quite clearly, there is some kind of pushback taking place. Look, there have been countries which have kowtowed to him, right? Without any resistance. We've seen Western Europe do it. We've seen some of the other countries which have been close allies of the United States do it, despite the fact that the United States or the leadership in the US has used rather insulting language towards those countries and their leaders. Despite that, they have decided, okay, fine, their interests lie in kowtowing to the US for now, at whatever terms and conditions they are getting. But there is a pushback from many of the other countries. Brazil, India, China, many other countries are saying that, listen, we are not going to take these bullying. And that is what I think is critical. And from my point of view, delusions of grandeur remain. And you can see that in the cabinet meeting. I think Kim Jong-un would be embarrassed by the kind of patronizing, the kind of fawning attitude of Trump's cabinet colleagues. I think even Kim Jong-un would be very surprised. All that the American cabinet did not do was clap like this, like happens in North Korea. Otherwise, they did everything else.
Well, David Sofair, let me just quickly bring you in on that point before I extend this conversation out to Andrew K. Pilang and, of course, Professor Chidden. Very quickly, David Sofair, this is quite now embarrassing for Donald Trump. He's overplayed his hand, he's misread the room, and his word is not the gospel. It's quite clear. This is completely indicative of America's waning influence.
You know, at the end of the day, it is a realignment. What America is doing, we are cleaning up historic wars, we are renegotiating trade terms, we are making America safe again, and we are becoming energy independent. Those are our core values. So by every metric, we are
just made
on
America small again. I'm sorry,
not really.
you made America small again. It's quite clear. If America was great again, if America had the capacities to dictate terms to the rest of the world, we wouldn't be seeing this convergence.
It's not dictation
we certainly wouldn't have seen this convergence. I mean, the things that have been said about India.
It's making trade fair again. I mean, you have to understand, and what you're not telling your viewers are, these are reciprocal tariffs, that we are realigning. How? Well, let's see. India has huge tariffs against the United States. So, well, if tariffs are so bad, how come every other country has them? And how come India has huge tariffs against other countries as well? China also has tariffs too. So
America
let's
is
be clear here that
hang on, America threatened China. Excuse me, sir. America threatened China with 145%. The Chinese said we'll match you percentage for percentage, and America backs off, and they try to collar India. Clearly,
well, it was a renegotiation.
they're interested in making World Trade Fair again.
It was renegotiation.
Oh, right.
So that was a negotiation
on
tactic.
extremely
and
hypocritical terms. Okay, on extremely hypocritical terms. If you think hypocrisy, sir, if you think hypocrisy is a fair tool, then good luck to you. But let me just open this up, because this gives us an opportunity.
Already have tariffs against us. So other countries have tariffs against us.
Do you want me to go through the laundry list?
Sure,
Okay.
let's go
Do you
through
want
the
me to
list
go
of
through
tariffs
the
now.
laundry
of the
list of
tariffs
hypocrisies?
that started.
But one second.
And then, yeah, sure, we can do that.
Okay.
I'd like to do that sometime.
Okay, fair enough. So
that'd be great.
okay, you live in the belief that you're making the world a safer, fairer place, and America great again. That's fine.
Yeah,
look, we're not going to join issue with you. As they say, certain people who haven't looked closely in the mirror end up with egg on their faces. Dr. Roxanne Zygon, I just have to bring you in on this. Number one, why do you think these three countries have come together? And why is it that if America is such a predominant power, these three countries have gone against the writ, so to speak, of Washington and Donald Trump?
Thank you for this great question. I say great question because we are practically living in a historical time. And we're experiencing not just the historical context, or geopolitical context, but the existential one. And what we're seeing now in China, the meeting of three superpowers, Russia, China, and India, it's a clear testimony that the world will never return to the same scale, to the same international relationship system as it was before. And it's a clear indication that the United States, as a predominant power on the geopolitical landscape, is getting weaker. And you were completely right saying that actually United States cannot control half of the world, cannot control the political will to move towards multipolar system, more fair system. That the world order that has been dictated by the ultra-globalism, is not working anymore. And the union of these three superpowers is actually the beginning of the new era of the world.
Let me bring in Dr. Andrew K.P. Leung. Dr. Leung, we're sitting in Tianjin. Right behind me is this big media center which abuts the plenary hall where the interactions have taken place. Rare moments where three leaders spontaneously came together and held what they have described as informal diplomacy for the world to see. They've tweeted those videos through their personal handles to send a message to Washington, D.C. But Dr. Leung, we've made a start in a city that apparently the meaning of the word, Tianjin, means to build sacred and golden bridges. We've built these bridges here. Do you think these bridges can be sustained? And how do we ensure that we don't fall back into the same narrow traps of competitiveness that we look to now leave behind? How do you see the future, and how do you see this coming together impacting geopolitics?
See the future to see to what extent this SCO summit means. You've got to look at the world tectonic plates that are in place since the end of the Second World War. The world order has been largely led by the United States after the end of the Second World War, based on commonly accepted rules, based on Americans' benign, I underline the word benign. The word benign means not just for its own self-interest, but also caring for some of the interests of its partners, including the Global South. And this has served other countries very well. I mean, China benefited from that order, India benefited from that order, and others. But however, under Trump 2.0, this order has been totally discarded in favor of American first unilateralism and coercion, and bullying, not only against Americans' perceived existential threat, which is China and Russia, but also against Americans' allies, including India, including the transatlantic partners. So the whole world is thrown up in chaos, disrupting global supply and value chains. And hence, the member countries in the global south are rallying together not to form a bloc against the United States, because no country wants to make an enemy of the United States, but to recalibrate their relationship with still the world's largest and most powerful country, the United States, but how to negotiate all these treacherous waters and to create a more cooperative global environment so that these countries can pursue their development interests, safeguard their sovereignty, and seek areas for cooperation. That's what's happening. And apart from these dynamics, unlike after the Second World War, the size of China, India, and many countries have grown. Now the size of China is about the same as the whole of the European Union. And then trace back about 40 years ago, the European Union was almost 10 times the size of China. Likewise, India. India is already the third world's largest economy, ahead of its former colonial power, Britain. So the whole world is changing in terms of economics, in terms of geopolitics. And then, of course, the so-called Washington Consensus, which was established after the beginning of shortly after the Second World War, favoring big U.S. companies, and then sometimes they trample upon the sovereignty of their host countries. So all these are coming together and transform itself into what we are seeing now under the umbrella of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which incidentally have expanded to include a lot of key players like the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Turkey, Egypt, and the middle quarter countries, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and additional countries in Asia, including Cambodia. So you can see the global south are being pushed together, as it were, rather than pulled together. As I said, not to form a bloc against the United States, but recalibrate relationships.
That's an important point.
Seek opportunities.
That's an important point. How that sort of transforms into a permanence, we're going to discuss. But I'm going to ask my colleague Ravinder to pan the camera as I walk and take a bit of an arc. And there you see, viewers, the buzz in this particular center. It's been electrified after that conversation took place between the three principals. Now, what does that actually mean? How does that translate into, at some level or the other, deeper cooperation, more meaningful cooperation to bring a certain degree of definition to this exchange? We're going to try and speak now to Sushant Sareen and get you a perspective of that. Sushant Sareen, the optics from the summit attendance to joint appearances and bilateral meetings are for everyone to see. We've seen that. We recognize that some people are saying here in this particular room that they signal strategic alignment and diplomatic momentum. And these are quotes that I'm reading out from the various interviews that I conducted today. Now, I want you to tell me whether this would have been possible without Trump trying to dictate in his own way to the rest of the world. And if you do agree, what is the one big takeaway in your mind from this moment where we are right now?
So, Rahul, two things. One, it wouldn't have been possible if Trump hadn't behaved like a bull in a china shop. The fact of the matter remains that, look, what is the reason why America had become an indispensable power? There were two things. One, there were economic benefits for engaging with America, which Trump has finished off with the kind of economic policies he's following. I'm not saying the Americans did not need to reorient their economy, but this is not the way to do it, what they're trying to do. And second was the strategic security which closer relationship with America provided country. That's also gone out of the window. Can Taiwan trust, for example, America today? Can any country trust America that America will have their back if they are pushed against the wall? No. So, what is the great incentive for being in the American sphere of influence today? If this is the American attitude, which is why I said this is a point of inflection. Now, the optics that we have seen from Tianjin are spectacular in many ways, right? We never expected this 6 months back. If you had told me this is what we'll see 6 months from now, I don't think I would have taken you seriously. But these optics now need to be backed up by something substantial. All these talks are very good, these pictures are very good, but how are you now going to put the meat on the plate? And I think that is going to be the tricky part. For example, between India and China, there are, of course, all the other issues aside, there is the boundary issue. Can we move towards fixing it? Not just managing it, but to an extent settling it. If we can do it, everything else will start falling in place. All that stock of trust being built up, everything else will fall in place. The same dynamic will operate with other countries as well. And I think that is the direction in which the establishments of all these countries will need to move if they want to take this to the next level. Otherwise, this is a nice photo op. It's a nice signaling thing. But that strategic realignment, I think we are getting ahead of ourselves at this point in time.
A very good considered view there, viewers. We've got to add the caveats, but we've also got to remember that the principal message coming out here is that America has been shown the mirror. And its reaction, viewers, has not been, how should one put it, anything really to be proud of if you're an American. We're going to look at that now in the next half of this show. An important marker, a watershed moment here in Tianjin, but the reaction in Washington, viewers, much to be desired, a little unhinged, ill-tempered, and unfortunately, it doesn't make America look great. It makes America look petty and small, and we're just going to now graduate to that part of this show.